Mounce, BBG, Chapter 14, Sentence 9. Once again, we are looking at that post-positive day, so you're going to pull that out before you even start. Make sure it goes to the front. And but now, hopefully you recognize noon is now. Y'all seek, and then hopefully the may you recognize is a lot like English as an accusative singular first person personal pronoun from ego. But again, just looking at that ending, you might be confused. Other than that's one of those forms that you just kind of have to memorize. Just remember when you see that mu, that's probably talking about a first person personal pronoun other than the nominative. Okay, so hopefully that helps. In this case, accusative. So then you follow it with an infinitive, to kill. So it's, but now y'all seek me to kill. Of course, we would switch that around. Now y'all seek to kill me. And then you have not just an accusative here with the may, but you also happen to have another accusative here. All right. And you know that because you see the new at the end of, the lexical form anthropos. So you know that that's the accusative singular. So you got these two accusatives, and you say, well, wait a minute. Well, it makes sense if you just go ahead and translate it as is, but now y'all seek to kill me, but make it indefinite, a man. All right. And then what's happening there? Well, you got those two accusatives. If you remember apposition, what you got? Same case, number, gender. And that's what we have now, except, of course, this doesn't tell you gender. First person pronoun is not going to tell you gender. What you do know, though, is that this refers back to it. The man that he's talking about is himself. So again, with the accusative singular masculine, you're talking about apposition, where anthropon is looking back to the earlier head noun. That head noun, in this case a pronoun, is me, and a man is referring back to me and further describing, referring back to me. So again, what you want to say is, if I ask you how is anthropon functioning in the sentence, you would tell me it's in apposition to me. Okay, in apposition to the pronoun may or me, if you want to say it in English. Not a big deal either way. Okay. So then we're introduced to our first relative pronoun and our first relative clause, and then you'll notice you have another relative pronoun here. So this is going to be a second relative clause. So let's tackle one at a time. And again, if you were working through a sentence, once you see a relative pronoun, best thing you can do in terms of breaking the sentence up is to just yank that out of there, yank all that out of there, and say, does the main sentence make sense without any of those relative clauses? In this case, but now y'all seek to kill me, a man. Period. Yep, makes sense. So knowing that, then let's take our first clause, relative clause, and we see has, which we know to be nominative, singular, masculine. Again, we've been running into a bunch of those. Who. And then just if we read it as is, who, the, and then aletheon from aletheia, accusative again because you see that the new there, but it's truth from aletheia. And then humin, you see that iota. In this case, the iota ought to be the thing speaking to you, because that ought to tell you that it's the dative form from su, which is your second person personal pronoun, but in this case plural. So to y'all, or to you if you want to do it that way, but I'd say to y'all. And then I have spoken. He gives you the verb. So who, the truth, to you, I have spoken. So you're going to take that out, and in order to make that relative clause make sense, you'd say who has spoken the truth to you. Okay, so who has spoken the truth to you? And hopefully that makes sense to everybody. All right. Now, before we go further, let's jump back for just a second, because you got to figure out what Haas is doing. Case number gender, you look left, and number gender is singular, and it's masculine. And what's masculine and singular right before it? Man or me. So it's referring back to Jesus, the speaker, because he's referring to himself. And then when you look at the case is where you go right or look within the relative clause. And in this particular instance, it is a nominative. So since it's nominative, it's replacing the subject. And of course, we said, who has spoken the truth to you? And if you were going to make that a complete sentence, you could easily do it by taking the Haas out, making it the subject, which would be I, and say, I have spoken the truth to you. Well, yep, makes perfect sense. So that tells you what that relative pronoun is doing, both in terms of the antecedent and the way that it functions within the relative clause. Now we go down to the second relative clause, which I heard. And para, of course, can run in all sorts of different directions. But, which I heard, para, God, obviously we're going to run with that as from, right? So, which I heard from God. You see tu theou, you know that that's genitive, so you're tempted to use a keyword. But remember, it is the object of preposition. So throw out your keyword. Just recognize that para takes the genitive, and that the idea there is from. So from God. All right. So this clause is which I heard from God. And then you have to say, well, okay, what's Hain doing within this relative clause? Well, it's feminine this time, and it's singular because you see the new, and that new not only tells you that it's singular, it tells you there's also accusative, right? So you got accusative, singular, feminine, and for number gender, you're looking for singular feminine in terms of an antecedent. And what in terms of an antecedent is singular and feminine? The only thing above that fits that category is truth. And so the which that he's talking about is the truth. That's what he's referring to here. The truth which I heard. And so then you say, well, okay, then case is what I look to the right for. And since it's accusative, then it's going to replace the direct object. So if you yanked the relative pronoun out and try to make sense of the relative clause just as a complete sentence, you'd say, I heard it, or I heard truth from God, because Hain is replacing the direct object. Direct object is referring back to his truth. So I heard the truth from God makes perfectly legitimate and perfectly great sense. So that tells you what Hain is doing within that clause. So again, a main clause with two relative clauses following it, and you want to know what Haas is doing here and what Hain is doing there, and that's what we gave you.